The Talking Cheeseheads on cheeseheadtalk.com.
Ben Larson joined by Justin Hall on the morning of the draft on cheeseheadtalk.com. It is so exciting. The Packers, the day has finally arrived. Not as much of an excitement this year overall, I think, Justin, for the draft. And I think that's a couple of reasons. And I know it's been talked about a lot here, but you've got the premier players in this draft, by and large, are linemen. And drafting a lineman, just ask anybody, the Packers have done it before. When you draft like an offensive lineman, that's probably the lowest, rung on the totem pole. Right above that, a defensive lineman. When you make those guys your first-round pick, even if they're like cornerstones of your franchise, it's so deflating for fans because nobody watches those guys play. I mean, they want them there. They want, a Joe Thomas or a Bulaga, who is a great pick.
Yeah.
Hopefully the injury, heals itself up here. But, you want those guys to be the best in the league, clearly. But when you do draft them in the first round, it's like, I'm going to watch this technique now. It's kind of tough. And yet that's what's dominating a lot of the best players in the first couple of rounds here, apparently. And then also there's just not a quarterback that people can get really excited about. And, of course, it's a quarterback's game. So, you kind of trying to see what's going to come of this draft and try and get excited, and that's where we're at. So I don't sense a lot of super hype that we've seen just in the past few years with the draft, with all these quarterbacks that came in last year and the year before. And it's a lineman's draft. What are you going to say? Time to get those guys some glory here.
You know what it's like? It's like going to a wedding and they have open bar and you get a Miller Lite. It's reliable. You know what you're getting there. But, I mean, you could go, J-Mo on the rocks. You can go, high-end old fashions, absolute bloody, whatever you want to do. But you order a Miller Lite. I mean,
you got to drive home, man.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think you hit it right on the head there. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think when you talk about the defensive line and some of these other positions, it's a good thing for Green Bay because, as we'll talk about here in a bit, I think toughness is a huge thing for the Packers that they need to get better at. And, some of these guys, that's where it starts. It starts in the trenches. That's what people talk about. So defensive line, with there being stacked there, a lot of options. The Packers could go there. Even offensive line, although I'm shying away from that spot just because I think they do have the strength and numbers from that. But you're right, Ben. It's probably going to be one of these things where they're going to pick somebody, and unless it's Eddie Lacy out of Alabama, who some people have in mocks, which I think would be an absolute terrible pick for the Packers at that spot, unless it's him, it's going to be one of these. You show up tomorrow and you pop up on YouTube and you try to watch video of a guy that's coming to Green Bay that, let's be honest, you never watched play football before.
Yeah, and you go on JS Online and you look at the articles or wherever, Scout Picks, Packer Report, and they interview an NFC scout, and it remains anonymous, or an AFC scout, and one guy says he's going to be a Hall of Famer, and the other guy says it's the worst pick in the history of the world, and we pull out our hair because we have no idea what to say. Scout will say, "Oh, he's just a guy." What the hell does that mean? He's just a guy. Anyway, but we'll see how those things pan out. No matter what happens, We'll break it down, tomorrow morning, whether they trade out of the pick or trade up or make a pick. And then, that's the first-round pick everybody pays so much attention to. But, look, Randall Cobb, Nick Collins, Greg Jennings.
Jordy Nelson was taken in the second round. Yeah.
Jordy Nelson. Look at these guys who have taken in the second round. Not to say that Packers clearly haven't had late first-round picks pan out. There's a certain Hall of Fame quarterback that comes to mind who plays for them right now. But we really, I'm excited to see Friday and Saturday arrive and analyze some of those picks, because it seems like Ted Thompson's always grabbing a starter and a really good player in later rounds. And so, really Monday's going to be the day where we can really, hash out and see what guys we might, be able to pick to get excited about for this Packers team. But having said all that, one of the big topics, if you look at the entire draft now, is area of need for the Packers, because you can't pin everything on that first round pick. So what would you say, and I think I know your answer here, but what do you say is the biggest area of need for the Packers?
It's interesting because you could go in a lot of different directions here. I think every area that you can bring up, there's names, there's players. You could start with safety if you want, but you still have Jerron McMillan and M.D. Jennings and Sean Richardson, three guys, young guys that still could be developing. Obviously, Morgan Burnett, they like him. And, kind of the staple of that defensive backfield right now. You can go on the defensive line, but you still have B.J. Raji. They drafted Mike Daniels last year, who I think is going to be a solid player. C.J. Wilson, he's entering his 4th season. He's been good as a 7th-round pick. Ryan Pickett, the names are there, so that's even a spot where you have bodies. So I don't necessarily look at anywhere as an absolute need on this team. I just wonder, come that point, who are you looking at, and are they an upgrade? Is drafting a Matt Elam, an Eric Reed, or a Jonathan Cyprien at safety in that spot, is that going to be an upgrade over the guys I mentioned before? Is taking a Sylvester Williams out of North Carolina, Jonathan Hankins out of Ohio State, Sheldon Richardson out of Missouri, taking one of these guys, if they happen to be there, Richardson's probably going to be gone, bad example, but still, are those guys going to be an upgrade over the players you have, over Mike Daniels, over Jarrell Worthy? So I think that's what it's going to boil down to for Green Bay. With their area of need I don't know what it is. Their area of need is where can they get better at that spot. That's truly their area of need.
Well, and you're going to have guys, of course, coming back from injury like a Desmond Bishop and hopefully Nick Perry here. But I think if you had to isolate one, I do think it's that the potential at least to get a playmaking safety, which is a lot easier said than done. And keep in mind, Nick Collins, a 2nd-round pick, right? And he was as good as the Packers have seen in a long time. Unfortunately, of course, cut short due to injury. But that type of player is what a lot of people are saying. Well, we need to get another Nick Collins. Okay. Easier said than done. But keep in mind that doesn't necessarily have to be the 1st-round pick. That can be in the 2nd or 3rd round in this draft. If Ted Thompson really thinks this is my guy to be a playmaker, then that's what's going to happen. And I look at, I kind of tested out what I'm thinking as far as what I'd like to see the Packers take some shots at. And I would, and I know we've had a little point of contention on this. Not that it's Eddie Lacy, because I certainly don't think it needs to be Eddie Lacy. It can be a later round pick, according to a lot of people in this draft. But, a running back that at least you're bringing that. As I said, Benson was in town, I guess, yesterday, and he's thinking about signing again with the Packers. Looks like that's probably going to happen because they'll get him at the real cheap price. You got DeJuan Harris, okay. But I'd like to, Mike McCarthy, it seems more than at any time in his career in Green Bay, he really seems now, and I know this is a lot, the proof is in the pudding here come September, actually, but he really seems to be saying, I need to make a bigger commitment to the running game. Like last year, that was a huge epiphany for him, like in November, like, oh, we've got to start this earlier. And so I think they have some guys they want to tinker with here already on the team, but I think they're going to draft a running back. I really do. And then the guy they're going to give a chance to.
Yeah. I look at the Benson thing in a different way as you, Ben. I look at them getting a look at Cedric Benson before the draft, before this weekend, and putting him up on their board and being like, okay, this is where we fit Cedric Benson in with Jonathan Franklin of UCLA and Stephon Taylor of Stanford, Monte Ball, Le'Veon Bell, all these other guys. This is where we put them. So if we're at a point where best available on our board is better than Cedric Benson, let's go ahead and draft this guy, and we don't have to bring back Cedric Benson. If they run down where, let's say they have Benson as their 4th running back on the board, so to speak, and the top 3 are gone, guess what? Call Cedric Benson, get him in there, and forego going with a running back. I think, number one, people are undervaluing DeJuan Harris and how much they like this guy. And then number 2, I think they're overvaluing what an offense or what a running back potentially can do in this offense. You have the best quarterback in the NFL. You're not going to take the ball out of his hands and give it to a guy 30 times a game who at best is going to be able to give you 4 or 5 yards. That's the difference here. That's why if Green Bay takes a running back in the first 2 rounds, when you have depth issues on the defensive line and on the safety spot and guys in this draft that could potentially be upgrades, it's going to be a mistake. Anything before the 2nd round is a mistake for Ted Thompson to make.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think there's plenty of opportunities to get a guy who can contribute 3rd round and beyond. Yeah. And, I'll tell you, I agree with you about Aaron Rodgers, and I'm 30 times no, but I would really support 20 times. I got to tell you, because if you can get a guy that can make the defense respect you and walk one of those safeties up, oh, man, think of the possibilities. That's where I'm drooling about it, with what they can do. And speaking of that, on the offensive front, a lot of people point to the offensive line, but I look at it and say, well, if everybody's healthy, where? Are you not confident in Evan Dietrich Smith at center? Do you feel like I think the guards. I know it's not the best line in football, but left tackle. And if you go left tackle to try and have an upgrade from Marshall Newhouse, can that guy play right away? And are you going to get a guy like that where you're picking? I know, and they're going to draft some offensive linemen because they like trying to develop them. I'm not saying they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But is there really an area in this draft you can look to really upgrade immediately? I'm not seeing that.
And you look at some of the offensive linemen that are there. You have Justin Pugh out of Syracuse. His knock is small arms. It's almost like he's a spitting image of Brian Bulaga when he ended up coming out. Menelik Watson's a kid out of Florida State. I saw him some mock drafts going to the Packers. He's physically, he looks like Tarzan, not necessarily plays like Jane, but he's kind of a developmental project there. Remember, too, the Packers still have Derek Sherrod, who they took in the first round a couple of years ago. Now the devastating leg injury, he's going to be able to come back. Who knows on that spot? But that would be the point, too, Ben. I could even see taking an offensive tackle over a running back, because if you are trying to upgrade over Marshall Newhouse's contract's up after this year. So they're going to have to make a decision on him one way or another. So that could be, if they're giving up on Sherrod, you go offensive tackle at that spot. You can make room for it. But even the second round, you look at Travis Frederick, the center out of Wisconsin. I know there's some interest with him. Could he be that upgrade over Evan Dietrich Smith, your center of the future? So, offensive line, guard is the two spots when you look at, okay, you got Lang and Sitton tied up into contracts. Bulaga, you like him at either tackle because he can move around. So maybe you could use a boost up at an offensive tackle. I think that makes more sense than it does, spending a first-round pick on Eddie Lacy, a guy who you're not going to utilize as much as you potentially will with an offensive lineman, a defensive tackle, or even a safety.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, it all plays out tonight. Enough talking about it. Let's just see what happens and how it
What's your
breaks down
prediction,
here.
Ben? I want your prediction on who they take.
No, I told you that. I told you this. I'm going to stick with it. It's the total cop out, but I don't care because I actually think it has a good chance of happening.
So who are they going to take with their first pick?
Shot, so I'm just going to ride it.
Who do they take at number 36 in the second round?
The first pick overall. I can't give you a specific player at all because I would just be completely talking out of my rear end on that. But I think it's going to be a secondary safety player. I think it's going to be a safety. Okay, right. That's my role there. I know, right? Because you got the kid from Ohio State, right?
I think Jonathan Hankins. I think they're going to go defensive tackle.
Okay.
Although John Jenkins, who sounds like Jonathan Hankins, I think if they pick the kid out of Georgia, it'd be close enough. Well, so yeah.
Jeff Jenkins is playing football now. I don't know. All right, we'll roll on. I know, horrible joke, horrible. Why did I say it? We're gonna roll on and talk a little bit about Packers toughness. The Bob McGee article from the Journal Sentinel, and pretty much what every Packer fan's been talking about since the read option decimated this team for 579 yards. We'll do that next year on CheeseheadTalk.com.
The Talking Cheeseheads on CheeseheadTalk.com.